Sometimes the people you miss most are the exact ones who suddenly can't answer. You stare at their name on your phone and feel your chest tighten instead. You want comfort so badly, but the closer it gets, the more impossible it feels. So you go quiet when you actually need to be honest. You pull back when you secretly want someone to notice. You act fine when you are anything but fine. And afterward, you hate yourself for making loneliness even lonelier. Because on the surface, it makes no sense at all. Why would someone push people away right when they need love, support, and understanding most? But deep down, it actually makes painful psychological sense. Needing someone can feel dangerously close to depending on them. And depending on someone can wake up every old fear you thought you buried. The fear of being too much. The fear of being ignored. The fear of being disappointed right when you are already barely holding together. So instead of reaching out, you protect yourself before anything even happens. You leave first emotionally, even if nobody was planning to leave you. That is the part most people never see. They only see the distance, the delayed replies, the cold tone, the disappearing act. They do not see the panic underneath it. They do not see how vulnerability can feel like standing barefoot on broken glass. Because for some people, closeness has never felt completely safe. Maybe love was unpredictable growing up. Maybe attention came with criticism. Maybe comfort came late, or not at all. Maybe your feelings were treated like inconveniences instead of signals. So now your nervous system learned a brutal little lesson. Do not need too much. Do not ask too clearly. Do not lean too hard. And definitely do not let anyone see how deeply you care. Because once they know, they have the power to hurt you. That does not mean you are dramatic. It means your mind became protective in the only way it knew. A lot of pushing people away is not rejection. It is pre-rejection. It is your body trying to outrun a wound before it gets reopened. You assume distance will hurt less than disappointment. You assume silence will feel safer than honesty. You assume hiding will protect your dignity. But what actually happens is more complicated. You do not feel safer. You feel isolated, misunderstood, and secretly resentful that nobody came closer. Even though part of you made closeness almost impossible, that contradiction can make you feel broken. It can make you wonder why you sabotage the very thing you crave. But sabotage is usually just self-protection, wearing the wrong clothes. It looks irrational from the outside because it was built in emotional survival mode. And survival mode is not elegant. It is fast, defensive, and deeply loyal to old pain. That is why this pattern shows up strongest during emotional overload. When life feels stable, you can be open, warm, and connected. But when stress hits, something changes underneath your personality. You become harder to reach. You read care as pressure. You read concern as intrusion. You read simple questions like hidden demands you cannot emotionally afford. How are you can suddenly feel heavier than it should. Not because the person asked something wrong, but because answering honestly would require exposing a messy inner world. And exposing that world feels dangerous when you already feel fragile. So you choose the safer role. You become busy. You become tired. You become vague. You tell people you just need space, even when space is the problem. Then you sit alone wishing somebody understood your silence without making you explain it. That wish is more common than people admit. A lot of emotionally deep people want connection without the humiliation of needing it. They want closeness that asks nothing from them first. They want someone to stay near without forcing them to open immediately. They want to be gently understood before they can speak clearly. Because when you learn to handle pain privately, asking feels unnatural. You may even pride yourself on being self-sufficient. You become the strong friend, the calm one, the thoughtful one who knows how to hold everybody else together. But that identity comes with a hidden cost. People start trusting your composure more than your inner reality. And eventually, you start doing it too. You begin performing okayness even when your mind feels like a dark, crowded room. Then when you finally need support, you do not know how to switch roles. You do not know how to suddenly become the one needing comfort. So instead, you withdraw and wait for the storm to pass privately. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it gets worse because nobody knows how far down you actually are. And then another painful story gets added to the pile. See, nobody really shows up for me. But often, the full story sounds more like this. Nobody showed up the exact way I needed, and I never fully showed them. That is not blame. That is grief mixed with truth. The truth is, many people who push others away are not avoiding love. They are avoiding exposure. They are avoiding the raw, shaky feeling of being emotionally visible while uncertain of the outcome. Because if you reach for someone and they miss it, the pain gets specific. It confirms every fear you already carry. That you are hard to hold. That your needs arrive at the wrong time. That your inner life is too complicated for anyone to stay with. So distance becomes a shield against confirmation. If nobody gets the chance to fail you, your hope stays technically intact. That matters more than people realize. Sometimes you would rather protect the idea of connection than risk a real disappointment. Fantasy can feel safer than reality. Imagining support feels safer than asking for it. Longing quietly feels safer than hearing someone say the wrong thing. So you stay unreadable. And unreadable people often get called independent, mysterious, or emotionally unavailable. But underneath, many of them are simply scared of needing witness. There is also anger in this pattern. Not loud anger, usually. More like quiet resentment that builds in the background. You feel hurt that people are not noticing. You feel disappointed they are not trying harder. You feel almost insulted that your pain remains invisible. Yet when someone does come closer, you often make it hard for them to stay. You answer with one-word texts. You said nothing is wrong. You cancel plans. You pull your energy back just enough to confuse them. This is where relationships start becoming painfully circular. The more you need reassurance, the more defensive you become. The more defensive you become, the less safe others feel approaching you. The less safe they feel, the more distance appears. And that distance seems to prove your worst assumptions. Nobody really wants the full version of me. But often, they never got to meet the full version. They met the armored version. They met the exhausted version, trying not to fall apart in public. They met the part of you trained to survive contact, not receive care. That distinction matters, because it means your behavior is understandable without being permanent. You are not doomed to repeat this forever. But change usually starts with one uncomfortable realization. Pushing people away may protect you from immediate hurt, but it also protects your hurt self. It keeps the wound untouched, unnamed, and fully in charge. And wounds that stay hidden often keep writing your relationships for you. This is why the pattern can feel strongest with the people who matter most. Strangers do not activate your deepest fears. Casual acquaintances cannot disappoint you in the same way. But someone you truly love can. Someone whose opinion matters can shake old pain awake instantly. So when attachment gets real, your defenses get louder. You become more sensitive to tone, timing, pauses, and tiny changes in energy. A delayed reply feels loaded. A distracted voice sounds like rejection. A simple misunderstanding can feel like proof that closeness is unsafe. Your reaction may seem too big for the moment. But the moment is rarely the whole story. Usually, it is touching years of stored emotional memory. That is why your body reacts before your logic catches up. You do not sit down and decide to become distant. You feel overwhelmed, exposed, or ashamed, and distance becomes the fastest exit. Sometimes it even looks like irritation. You snap at people trying to help. You get cold when they get kind. You feel suffocated by perfectly normal care. Then later, when you are alone, the guilt arrives. You replay your tone. You replay their face. You wonder why tenderness feels unbearable exactly when you need it most. And the answer is not that you do not want love. It is that love can feel most dangerous when you are least offended. When you are hurting, your skin gets thinner emotionally. Everything reaches you faster. Everything means more. That includes kindness, especially kindness. Because kindness softens you, and softness can feel risky when life already hurts. So you push it away to stay composed. You would rather look detached than look needy. You would rather seem unavailable than be seen trembling underneath. That choice often starts young. A child who learns their emotions overwhelm other people starts shrinking them. A child who gets mocked for sensitivity starts hiding tenderness. A child who never knows which version of love is coming becomes hyper-alert. Then that child grows up and calls it personality. I'm just private. I am just bad at opening up. I just need a lot of space. Sometimes that is partly true, but sometimes space is not peace. Sometimes space is a carefully decorated hiding place. And the hardest part is that it can feel familiar enough to trust. Loneliness, can feel safer than closeness. You cannot control. That is why healing this pattern is not simply about communication tips. It is about safety. Real, internal safety. The kind that lets you feel need without instantly feeling shame. The kind that lets you tell the truth before resentment hardens around it. The kind that lets you say, I'm struggling without hearing weakness in your own voice. That kind of change usually happens slowly. First, you notice the moment before you disappear. You notice the urge to withdraw right after feeling hurt. You notice how quickly your mind turns pain into silence. That pause is powerful. Because once you can see the pattern, you are not fully trapped inside it. You get one new option. Maybe not a perfect one, but enough to shift the story. Maybe instead of vanishing, you send one honest sentence. Maybe instead of saying nothing, you say, I'm overwhelmed and don't know how to talk yet. Maybe instead of acting cold, you admit you feel exposed. Those moments can feel impossibly small. But emotionally, they are huge. They interrupt a lifelong reflex. They teach your nervous system that connection does not always end in injury. And no, that does not mean everyone will respond perfectly. Some people still will not get it. Some people only know how to handle polished emotions. Some people want access to you without the responsibility of understanding you. That hurts, but it is useful information. Because healing is not begging unavailable people to suddenly become safe. Healing is learning to recognize who can actually hold honesty without punishing it. And just as important, learning that you deserve those people. Not because you are easy. Not because you are always graceful. Not because you never shut down. But because your inner world is still worthy of witness. Even the messy parts. Especially the messy parts. You do not need to become endlessly open to prove growth. You do not need to tell everyone everything. You just need to stop treating your own need as evidence against your worth. That is the deeper shift. Need is not weakness. Need is human. And the people who make you feel ashamed for having needs were never teaching strength. They were teaching fear. A lot of people live inside that fear for decades. They become admired, competent, funny, dependable, and deeply unreachable all at once. They know how to comfort others better than themselves. They know how to disappear without making a sound. They know how to look normal while feeling emotionally stranded. If that sounds familiar, it does not mean something is wrong with you. It means your heart learned caution before it learned trust. And caution can keep you alive emotionally for a while. But eventually, it starts costing more than it's safe. Because the more you hide your need, the more invisible your pain becomes. And invisible pain has a way of turning into identity. You start believing you are simply someone who handles everything alone. But maybe that is not your nature. Maybe that is your adaptation. Maybe the real you has been waiting under all that restraint. Waiting for a safer way to be known. Waiting for proof that closeness does not always end in disappointment. Waiting for you to stop apologizing for having a heart that reaches. So the next time you feel yourself pulling away right when you need someone most, notice it gently. Not with shame. Not with self-attack. Just with honesty. Maybe this is not me rejecting people. Maybe this is me trying to survive old feelings in a new moment. That one thought can change more than you think. Because when you understand the pattern, you stop calling yourself impossible. You start seeing the frightened logic underneath the distance. And once you can see that, you can begin choosing differently. Not perfectly. Just more truthfully. Because the opposite of pushing people away is not becoming emotionally effortless overnight. It is letting one real person come a little closer than your fear prefers. It is risking being known while still feeling shaky. It is learning that being held does not always end in loss. And maybe the most important part is this. The fact that you push people away when you need them most does not mean you do not want love. It usually means love matters so much that losing it feels unbearable. And that is not coldness. That is tenderness that never learned where it was safe to land. So if you have been blaming yourself for your distance, look again. There may be pain there. There may be history there. There may be a younger version of you still bracing for impact. And maybe what you call pushing people away is really a heart protecting its last open door. But protection is not the same thing as peace. And one day, if you are honest enough with yourself, you feel the difference. You realize the walls were never home. They were just shelter. And shelter can save you in the storm. But it was never meant to become your whole life.